Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Amazing Podcast. We hope you're enjoying all of the conversations that we're having with many of the industry leaders and innovators in this space, the cloud native and Kubernetes space. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at amazic.com. And if you like what you hear on this episode, definitely check out all of our other episodes, wherever you're listening on Spotify, or whether that's YouTube, or even if you want to hop over to our website, which is amazic.com, amazic.com, you'll find not just these podcast episodes, but you'll also find articles and you'll find coverage of events like KubeCon, and you'll even find some job listings there. So there's a lot happening. Definitely head over to our website, amazic.com. I have with me today Joe Duffy, who is the founder and CEO of Pulumi. They're an interesting company that has quite a cool product, something that's in a space that's really talked about today, platform engineering. And so that's what we're going to be discussing today, Pulumi and its approach to platform engineering. So Joe, welcome to the show. It's great to have you with us. How are you doing?
Thank you, Twain. It's wonderful to be here. I'm doing great and looking forward to the conversation.
All right. Yeah. So as we get started, I was wondering if you could give us a bit of an intro to yourself and just your journey, even before starting Pulumi. I think you spent some time at Microsoft as well. If you could kind of give us a brief background of your what you've done so far and what led you to found Pulumi. That'll be a lovely starting point for us.
It sounds great. Yeah, I spent a lot of time at Microsoft before founding Pulumi, almost 14 years. And the whole time there, I was working in and around developer platforms. And so I actually got started as an early engineer on the .NET framework, helped with some of the C# programming language design and implementation. Actually led the team that created async and await and task of T for .NET. Managed a lot of groups in Windows and led a research operating system effort. And really the whole time I was there, the thing that got me out of bed in the morning was how to make developers more productive. And got really excited about the cloud. And I'd actually started a consulting business very early in my career before Microsoft. And that planted the entrepreneurial bug, where I kind of knew I always wanted to go create a company eventually. And it was just a matter of time. And I never thought I would stay at Microsoft for so long, but it just so happens there were always fun problems to work on, always amazing people, always new things to learn. But it was eventually, my co-founder Eric and I were talking about, hey, now's a perfect time to go start something. And this thing called the cloud came along and really changed everything about software. And it was really exciting to us because it's really the age of distributed computing is finally here. Infinite scale data and compute. And yet the tools that were out there that people were using were not really as good as we had imagined. We thought, hey, we've been working on great developer experiences and languages and IDEs and all these great things. And yet the world of infrastructure really didn't have most of those things. And, developers didn't think about distributed architectures. It was more, infrastructure was sort of an afterthought. And we thought there was a better way. And so that led to founding Pulumi.
Wow, neat. I want to kind of, get into a bit more of what you mentioned there, that, you've always been working with developer platforms. And, I'm curious just for you to know your take on just platform engineering, the way we talk about it today, and the way it was probably back then, before the term was even coined. Do you see it as there was always platforms, it's just that they were called something else, or platform engineering was being done in a different way than today? Or do you see it as platform engineering is quite new and you need to really understand some things that are unique to platform engineering today that wasn't there before? What's your take on just this concept of platform engineering?
Yeah, I think it's been a continuous evolution, through our journey to DevOps and to platform engineering. I do think there's a shared lineage. And I think it's really been a continuous set of improvements and refinements. I think to me, the biggest difference in the platform engineering era is what is the interface between the developer team or teams, many teams usually, and the infrastructure team, the people that are building the centralized infrastructure provisioning, shared services, increasingly these days, Kubernetes clusters. And I would say the interface is the biggest thing that has changed. I think the practices, whether you call it DevOps or platform engineering, has incrementally improved. I think it's gotten a lot more software centric over time. It's gotten a lot more engineering centric over time. But to me, the defining characteristic that really has changed is we've gone from a world where developers interface with the infrastructure team via ticketing to now having more self-serve options, whether that's Kubernetes is that interface where you can deploy a workload to a shared cluster, or maybe that's a self-serve portal, you go point and click, or even for many of our customers, infrastructure as code is that interface. And to me, that's been the biggest change, at least, from our point of view.
Interesting that you talk about self-serve as becoming the way that the platform engineering is done today. I want to ask more about that, just about some of the challenges around platform engineering, especially as you make a transition to kind of the cloud native way of doing platform engineering. What would you say are some of the mistakes, the common mistakes, the pitfalls that organizations face when they think about self-service and platform engineering? How do you do it the right way, or in other words, what do you avoid when you're transitioning into platform engineering?
Yeah, I think the common pitfall that I see the most is going too far to one extreme or the other. At one extreme, you can give all of your developers all access to spin up any infrastructure without regard for security or cost or best practices. And that usually ends up in a mess, a security problem, cost management problem. But then on the other extreme end of the spectrum, it's to completely insulate your developers and force them to go through a ticketing system and wait 2 months to get a new microservice stood up. So I think the success patterns we see is a balanced approach, which is developers are increasingly in the driver's seat and can spin up infrastructure, but there are guardrails in place to make sure it's secure, it's following the organization's best practices, you have visibility into it, policies are enforced. I think the challenge is, we are trying to make that a lot easier. But what we see is there's just so many building blocks and services and tools and practices that almost every team sort of does it differently, and they have to figure it out on their own. And that's a really unfortunate thing because most people are trying to achieve the same outcome, right? But they have to kind of go through and figure out, okay, what CI/CD am I using? What am I doing for policy? Am I building a custom UI for my developers, or am I going to use Backstage? And there's just so many decisions. It's still very complicated.
So for someone who's been considering platform engineering and they want to, get into it, but they're not sure where to start or how to start, and I'm sure you've seen many of your customers make that journey as well, the transition to platform engineering. What would you advise? Where do they start? How do they choose particular projects or teams? What advice do you have for those who are interested and want to get started?
I think a common pattern of successful companies is that they start small and they prove success on something that's much more manageable, that is connected to tangible business value, like a tangible business outcome. I think the idea of just taking a bunch of stuff you already have and redoing it and then exposing it in a platform way, usually it gets very big very quickly. You may not be able to show business value soon enough. And depending on your organization, some companies are top down. The CTO will say, you must use this new system. But most of the ones we work with are not top down. The self-serve, it's so convenient that it draws people to use it. And so once you build that first successful use case, you can go on a roadshow. You can tell people in your company, hey, look, if you need a new environment, here's the way to do it. And that can start the ball rolling and really get the momentum going. But I think trying to boil the ocean from day one typically does not lead to success.
Oh, that's interesting. When it comes to platform engineering, there's obviously, different ways to do it. There's different even open source tooling available, the different vendors. And so it's now become quite talked about within the cloud native circles, especially. And could you give us a bit about, Pulumi's approach itself to platform engineering? What's unique, and how have you positioned yourself to say that this is the route we're going to take towards platform engineering? Could you talk to that a bit?
For sure. I think what Pulumi historically has been known for is our infrastructure as code tool, which is open source and you get to use any programming language. And what we found was over the last 2 years, increasingly people picking up infrastructure as code were actually using it to build platforms. And why is that? Well, our tool is highly programmable because it's any programming language. So if you're using Go, you can easily embed infrastructure as code into the larger system. And so over the last couple of years, we recognized these patterns. And we actually did something which is basically a platform team in a box. So you can come to Pulumi, get everything set up in a day, literally in an afternoon, have a platform working end to end that has infrastructure provisioning, application deployment, continuous delivery, policy enforcement, deployment observability, so you can actually see what's going on, and all the sort of standard patterns that we see. The way that we approach it is it's sort of batteries included, so you can swap in components if you want. We have a developer portal, but if you prefer to use Backstage, we have a plugin to integrate with that. So that's a good way to get started, but there's a lot of other solutions out there, right? You could start with Backstage. There are other companies like Humanitech, there are a lot of folks that are trying to make this simple. But our approach has been easy things easy, hard things possible. So if you just want a basic platform in an afternoon, that's going to be easy for you. And then you can customize it from there.
All right, all right. There's been a lot of updates. I just checked out your website and I saw that there's different new features that you've been launching recently. And one of the interesting ones is just the work you're doing around AI and how that helps with platform engineering. Could you talk a bit about that? What have you guys built with AI? How have you included it into Pulumi?
Yeah, for us, AI, there's two pillars. One is us helping with AI workloads. When I think AI, I hear infinite data, infinite compute, like the requirements can be quite intense. And Pulumi's approach is very good for that level of complexity. So we see a lot of AI companies actually using Pulumi for AI workloads. And we partnered with LangChain and Pinecone and a bunch of other folks to build reference architectures for common AI patterns. So that's kind of one pillar. But the second pillar, which is pretty exciting, is applying AI to the domain of infrastructure management. And so we started on this actually 18 months ago, building our own coding assistant. We have something like 40,000 examples, but we don't always have that exact thing that you're looking for because, we have 160 different cloud providers. Each one has dozens of services, and we don't always have that exact thing off the shelf. But this coding assistant, you can go ask it, say, hey, I want this topology, and it will give you the code. But we're about to take it to the next level. We have some pretty exciting launches coming up soon where that AI technology will be applied in a bunch of different ways.
Wow, sounds cool. Could you actually give us a little demo of how this works?
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to. And I should say this is free to use up on our website. So everything I'm doing right now, you can actually go and do it at the same time I'm doing it if you want.
Okay.
I don't know if you can, sorry, I'm trying to get the resolution right. Does this look okay?
Yeah, it is visible here.
So Pulumi.com/AI. I'll zoom in just a little bit. So
Okay.
basically, this is just a web tool. There are various forms of this. We actually have a command line version of it. If you log into our service, we have it embedded in our service. But I'll just show you just this version because it's fun and it's interactive. So I might just want something simple, right? Like a static website on AWS. And I can pick my language. I'll stay in TypeScript for now. And this is actually using our models, which are basically based on GPT. We have the ability, you can see in the bottom, you can swap out different models. You can ask it to explain the code or just show me the code. And it's going to go through, and we've taught it about all of the cloud resources that Pulumi supports and all of the cloud, the syntax for Pulumi programs. So you can see it's going to write this. And although it sounded simple, a static website on AWS, it turns out you have to configure an S3 bucket just the right way. You have to upload all of your website files, using bucket objects. You have to set up CDN, CloudFront distribution with all of these, particular settings on it. And this is such a common scenario. I'm sure we have this example out of the box. But you can take this and, go ahead and copy it and go create a new Pulumi project and just get up and running quite quickly. You also have this button here that if you click this, it will walk you through the process of deploying this interactively. But let's just do one quick thing, which is, if I go back here, let's say I want a more, I want it to actually explain a little bit more, and I want AKS cluster in Azure with a Cosmos DB database. And for fun, we'll also install an Nginx Helm chart into my cluster. So this is quite complicated, and I'm going to pick Python for this one. Turns out Python is one of our fastest growing languages, especially a lot of AI teams in that first category, the first pillar of AI. A lot of AI folks, love Python, and the fact that you can stay in your favorite language is a big deal. And, although this is fairly complicated, it is totally up for the task, and it's just going to go explain what it's doing and then give me the code. Very similar. You also notice, fun enough, at the bottom here, I can generate Terraform or YAML or Java, basically any language. Even after I've generated this, if I want to swap languages, I can do that. Or if at the end I say, I can say, hey, please show me the same thing, but running in AWS, and it will go ahead and do that. So it's quite capable of doing effectively anything you need and giving you a place to start.
Wow, this is really cool. Amazing. How do you see this being used by developers? What kind of projects are these being used in, and what stage of projects? Any comments on that? What have you observed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the usage patterns are slightly different than what I had anticipated going into it. It turns out some of our biggest customers working on the most complex projects actually use this just continuously as they're working. I thought personally it would be used more for people that are new to the cloud or just getting started, and it's helpful for that. But I think when you get into really complex architectures, it can be tough to figure out how to stitch together all these building blocks, and so it can be incredibly helpful for that.
And to be able to write that detailed code with so many instructions and sub instructions, it takes some integrations going on at the back end, right? So could you tell us a bit about that? What does that involve? How do you set that up? How do those integrations work?
Yeah, so it's getting more complex over time. It started out very simple, but we're working a lot on quality. We actually have benchmarks to drive code quality so that compilation rate is going up over time, the accuracy is going up over time. It started with ChatGPT prompt engineering on top of that through the API. Then we take the contents of our Pulumi registry, we actually vector encode that using a vector database and use that in the prompt. We've started using resource augmented generation so that at runtime or during evaluation time, as the AI is evaluating the prompt, it can reach out and pull information on demand from our documentation and other sources. Over time, they will get even more personal, so we'll actually know about you specifically. So if you have your own programs in Pulumi or your own organization-specific settings, it will know about those. And so it's just getting smarter. We're giving it more memory. The prompt size is much larger now because it's using GPT-4 Turbo. So it's very powerful, and it's very good too. It's actually frighteningly accurate.
And what impact does this have on the developer experience, or even to say just platform engineering workflows? in what way does this actually change those things that it used to be, let's say, before ChatGPT and before this was even possible?
Yeah, I think it's just really turbocharges productivity.
Hmm.
Because previously you'd be Googling, trying to find something, copy and pasting. Oh, it didn't quite work. Reading documentation, shooting in the dark, hoping you get it right. Whereas this can give, it doesn't always get it perfectly correct, but it almost always gives you at least something that's 90% correct, and then it gives you a great starting point from there. And honestly, you take that and you combine it with something like GitHub Copilot in your IDE, because we're just using general purpose languages, oftentimes you go to start extending this and it's going to give you completion from the AI in GitHub Copilot, which is usually very helpful too. So they go better together. And I think over time, we see a lot of opportunity for AI to help with platform engineering tasks, even outside of just writing your infrastructure as code.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow, really cool stuff. I should definitely keep watching, what you guys are up to with AI. Sounds very interesting and exciting what you're up to. Um, Another, aspect of product engineering that I wanted to touch on is just the idea of drift detection, especially in production. And it comes from this idea of declarative engineering, where you declare what you want to have running in production, and only that runs. And then drift is when something else is introduced in production. But I just wanted to get your thought, because I saw that you'd also done some work on drift detection recently, and you have a new announcement related to that. Could you tell us a bit about drift detection and how Pulumi handles that?
Absolutely. I think, we all wish drift didn't happen, but we all know that it often does. I think, there's the pristine, everything is in infrastructure as code, and you only ever deploy through infrastructure as code, and nobody ever logs into the cloud console. And it's, some people actually do enforce those things. And I would say that's like, top tier best practice. But operational reality sometimes gets in the way. If we're having a live site outage, we might need to break glass and log in and scale up a scaling group temporarily to relieve some load pressure, or open an SSH port so we can get into a server that we might not otherwise have access to. Like, there are things where sometimes you've got to break glass. And when you do those, now your infrastructure reality is drifted from your last known state. And that can be a problem. You can leave behind security issues. You can leave behind reliability issues that, where maybe next time you go to deploy, because of that mismatch, you have something unintended happens, you suffer some downtime. And so our new drift detection remediation capability will find those things, notify you about them, and it can automatically remediate them too. So, get rid of the drift instantly, or ask you what you want to do so you can decide. So that basically is right at the intersection of infrastructure as code and operational reality, is something many of our customers struggle with.
Mhm, mhm. Very interesting. So automatic remediation, that's pretty cool.
Mm.
Sounds like, there's some themes, kind of connecting all of the things that we are talking about, which is, developer productivity comes to my mind, enabling developers to do stuff faster, and also just, deployment frequency, just releasing faster and more frequently, because that's what this enables. There's a lot of other things, I'm sure. But could you talk a bit about kind of the idea and the values behind how you build your product, how you've designed it? What is your true north, as a product, as an organization? What do you optimize for? Could you talk a bit about that, kind of tying all of this together?
Yeah, our original vision was we want to democratize the cloud, and that means make the cloud as accessible to as many engineers out there as possible. You know, front end developers, back end engineers, infrastructure teams, security experts, and so our thesis was the cloud is really powerful, really exciting, and yet it's still too difficult to use, and too difficult to use in a correct, proper, secure, reliable way. And so a lot of our investments were, open source is core to everything we do. And we wanted to really focus on that amazing developer experience as step one. And that's why we launched the open source infrastructure as code technology. We still hold a relentlessly high bar on developer experience. We want people to feel like they've got superpowers when they're using Pulumi. And that focus on just end user love definitely keeps us going. Like that is the thing that from a product standpoint, we're never done in that department. And then what we see with customers as they adopt this, we're very customer centric. So we try to just solve the problems that we see them having at scale. And honestly, if you look at our product roadmap and everything we've done and everything we're going to do, a lot of it really is just helping customers be successful. And anytime they hit a stumbling block or anytime the cloud is not working for them, we're going to go do whatever we can to unstick them. But really over time, just lowering the barrier to use the cloud and use it to do amazing things. Because our thesis is, software is eating the world. That's a common thing. Well, the cloud is eating software. Like we don't build desktop software like we did in the 90s. Every piece of software is touched by the cloud, and that's really exciting.
Oh, really cool. There's something else that I saw, on your website that I want to ask you to kind of explain, which is TTL stacks. I think it's time to live stacks, and I'm guessing it may have something to do with releasing faster. But if you tell us a bit more about what are TTL stacks and how do they actually help? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. This is another one that came out of customer conversation. I was on a customer roadshow last year, and I would say like 5 customers back to back. They told me we want to enable self-serve for our developers. This is a platform team scenario. In fact, several of them wanted to enable self-serve for their data scientists because they want them to have experimentation platforms, and especially with AI, they want them to be able to move fast. And yet their concern was, well, what if they forget to spin it down when they're done with it? Well, now we've got all these environments that are costing us money. And so TTL stacks, the time to live is you set basically this, it's a self-destructing stack. So you can say after 72 hours, this infrastructure goes away automatically. And so we will automatically reclaim it. And the platform team can go set the policy, but then go empower developers and data scientists and end users and not have to worry about it costing them, unexpected amounts of money.
All right, really cool. So yeah, as we wind down our conversation, the last question that I have for you, Joe, is just as you look ahead, the next year or two, what's on the horizon according to you for platform engineering? What excites you? What are you keeping an eye on? What do you read about? What are you most interested about in this space, particularly in regards to platform engineering?
I think, I sort of alluded to this earlier, but everybody out there that wants to do platform engineering shouldn't have to go down the same path that takes often months or sometimes even years to put in place a platform. It really should be the kind of thing that you can get in an afternoon or a week or a month, right? It should not take that long. And so we're trying to take all the best practices we see out in the world and bake them into the platform. Again, Pulumi is always, easy things easy, hard things possible. So you'll always be able to swap in your own, opinionated way of approaching something, but we want to have more out of the box. So that's one. And the second big area, which I also alluded to, is AI. I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg about what AI can do to help simplify the task of infrastructure management. And so you're going to be seeing some things that, frankly, when I see the demos, it's just mind blowing. And I think a lot of people are going to appreciate the next level productivity and benefits that brings as well.
Wow, sounds exciting. I definitely want to be watching your blog to see what you're up to at Pulumi. Yeah, really cool stuff and a great demo as well. Thanks so much for joining us, Joe. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
Likewise. Thank you, Twain. It's fun to be here.
All right. And all of our viewers and listeners, thank you as well for tuning in, and we hope to see you on the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.